I'm really excited about this one. This post went really nuts on LinkedIn last week, and then I did a follow-up post on this week to get perspective from kind of my LinkedIn network on what would be most helpful for them. So wanted to go over it with customers get you guys' thoughts on this as well. So I don't want this to just be a one-way conversation, but this is a framework that we put together, and I would love to get all of your feedback and thoughts on how we could even be doing this better. I think if we'll just wait, I don't think we need to wait any longer. People will come in as they come, but I think we just dive in and get started. So the context around this, a few months ago, I just started thinking, man, like I'm seeing companies like Gong and I even saw BombBomb, you guys at BombBomb doing this, where multiple people from the team had started posting. And I was like, man, but I don't hear anybody talking about actually building a program around using the creative team to equip these people within these companies to post content, because it's clearly great for the brand when Sarah Brazier is posting from Gong and Devin Reed is posting from Gong and Chris Orlov is posting for Gong. Everybody starts going, well, who the heck is Gong? Because their people are putting out this fire content, and I want to learn more about the business. And so I was like, man, what if we built a systematic program and a framework that actually empowered our people to create content on a regular basis? And the biggest thing that keeps people from doing it is actually just not having the resources, the time, the skill to do a slide deck or a micro video, whatever it may be. They're not producing that much content because they're stuck on time and they don't have the resources to actually do it. But we as a company do. I mean, we've got videographers, we've got designers, we've got writers. So what if we paired those two and actually chose specific people within our business, paired them with creative assets on our team and said, hey, let's go to work. And our aspiration in the next 6 months is that our 5 evangelists would be posting 3 times a day on LinkedIn from each person. So because that's who the folks that I'm following, Dave Gearhart, Chris. I don't know that Chris Walker's posting multiple times a day, but the folks that I'm seeing that are getting massive reach, they're posting multiple times a day. Dan's been the first one on our team to start posting multiple times a day, and he's seeing the results. So all that to say, that's the setup for why I think building this kind of evangelism program or thought leadership program, whatever you want to call it, inside your business is so strategic, and especially for our customers who already have a pillar piece of content in the podcast that we're producing for all of you. This is a great, I think pairing that asset, the podcast, with a program like this could supercharge the results that you're seeing from your show. And so I'll dive right in. The first part of this framework, actually, I'll share this article with all of you in the chat here. Is identifying your evangelist. So the first thing we had to do, obviously this kind of seems like a no-brainer, but you got to include it. Who are you actually going to invest in? And this is a significant investment. So your creative team's resources, that person's resources, they also have a job. Logan leads our sales team. Dan's overseeing all of our marketing and audience growth and now customer experience. So having folks from your team do this takes an investment, but you've got to identify who it is. For us, we identified everyone on our leadership team with the exception of one person, our director of people and culture, people ops and culture, because he wasn't quite ready to start doing it yet. But as I was talking about this offline with Dan, I think one of the critical things is you've got to, the people that you invite to this program, they have to live and breathe your values. They have to be a reflection of what you claim to be. And so for us, that's loving people well, never stop learning, owning the result. So our first 5 evangelists are myself, Dan and Logan, who are on this call, Bill Reed, our COO, and then Kelsey Montgomery, our creative director. And all of them kind of ooze our values. And that was really, really important for us. The other thing, I don't know if it's the entrepreneur in me, but I have a tendency to want to go big or go home. And so my tendency would have been, well, let's get all 25 people on our team to be evangelists. And I had to reel myself back and go, wait a minute, let's start with 5, which I may even still be too aggressive, honestly, but let's start with a smaller number so that we can pressure test the system and the structure that it actually takes to do this. So those are the 2 key things here that I wanted to point out. You can obviously read, the article, how we elaborated more on this point there. Logan, Dan, would you anything to add there before we bump it to Logan for this next piece?
The thing I'll just add is, we started with James and I had already been pretty consistent in posting on LinkedIn. It seems like we were both kind of doing this. Like when he was up, I was down, and vice versa. Dan jumps in, starts posting regularly, even before we started this program. And then 2 other people on our team, Kelsey, more familiar with social, Bill not, just outside of LinkedIn. And so I would say don't necessarily limit it to the people who are already active on LinkedIn or whatever channel that you pick, but know that there's going to be some education. Like we had to walk Bill through, like, don't give a thumbs up in the engagement group, go to the post and those sorts of things. So there's going to be some education, but I would say don't limit yourself to just the people who have already been active on social, because you might be missing an opportunity. And Bill has really taken to it, and his content is starting to perform really well, and he's getting the hang of some of our best practices on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So
we've got, you've got somebody on your team that's, like Bill, for us, it's 35 years of business wisdom and he just never got savvy with social, but we don't want to lock down that wisdom, because that's going to be huge. Like that's going to attract a lot of people to our business, because that content's going to do really well and already has done well on social. So Logan, I'll kick it over to you. The second part of this framework is to establish pillar pieces of content. I alluded to this earlier. Obviously, the podcast is one. Logan, do you want to talk about what are some other examples of pillar content that we're using to kind of fuel this engine?
yeah, absolutely. So first I'll go through our list, and then 2, look at how you can figure out to start a new pillar piece of content, or look where you have a pillar piece of content that you're not necessarily thinking of in this way just yet. And then we'll talk about the system of slicing and dicing, but that'll be a little bit further down. But the quick list for us, so we've got B2B Growth as our podcast. We do a monthly B2B podcasting Q&A that's similar to this format, but it's external facing, where we're answering FAQs on podcasting. These sorts of customer mastermind calls, we've started to do these monthly, so we consider these a pillar piece of content. We're going to be starting a series called Content Camp that's specifically all around content marketing that we do on a regular basis, somewhat similar to these mastermind calls, but a little bit different. Even internal team meetings, we have leadership team meetings every Monday. We have all hands once a month. They're changing up the frequency there, but anything that is already kind of a forcing function you're already doing can be a way to extract other pieces of content out of that. We've even looked at sales calls as opportunities for a pillar piece of a content. I posted about this as, hey, do you think this is too crazy an idea? And of course, everybody was like, privacy obviously is the number one concern, but we looked at, hey, I'm recording all of my sales calls in Chorus, and I'm answering questions that are not, specific to the company situation, but I'm sharing something on how we think about naming your podcast or an audience growth strategy, that if we just take that snippet, I don't need to stop and then re-record, another time. It's more authentic. It's on the fly. So that can even be a pillar piece of content. You see other people, I guess Gary Vee would be the biggest example, where people are coming in and they're paying him for consulting, or they're not, but he's got, someone there documenting. We don't have the resources to have a video crew follow each and one of us around, but we have a webcam and we have Zoom, and it's pretty easy to hit record more often than you would think. So that's kind of our most, I think, outside the lines one there. And then another one, I saw Chris Walker start to do this, where he will, and Josh Feedy from Sales Reach, anytime your team is featured as a guest on another podcast, that can be an opportunity to get your own recording of that, or set up a separate webcam while you're being recorded, and then use that as a pillar piece of content that then you can slice and dice in other ways. And so those are some of the things. obviously your blog, if you're doing a webinar series, anything else you're doing with regularity and consistency, and you're not getting what I call, the most juice for the squeeze out of that, setting up a system to where it goes into a system to be sliced and diced in a number of different ways. And we'll talk a little bit about like, well, where do you start there? Because we always talk about like content on content on content. We all talk about that, but then it's like, well, how do I actually do that? We'll talk a little bit about starting with maybe 3 or 4 content types that you're always looking for. Can I pull this content type out of this pillar? Can I pull this content type? What makes sense? So
Yep. Awesome. So I just dropped a link to the doc that we actually used. It's a Google Doc. You'll notice it's a live doc that we've made adjustments to. But a few weeks ago, when we kicked off this program, we got all of the evangelists onto a call, and we documented our points of view. We documented our content theme. So a lot of what we're talking about here in the first 5 parts of this 10-part framework, you're going to see reflected on on this document that I just put in the chat. So I want to make sure everybody had that. Dan, I want to kick it over to you to talk about determining your content themes and why it was such a critical part of this process.
I think the content themes is what ties it all together. You can all be out there talking about your niche, your topic of expertise. For me, it's marketing. For Logan, Lamore sales. James from the CEO perspective. But unless you have the themes to kind of tie it together, then you're not hitting it with like a unified front. I know for Sweetfish Media, we decided to go after like what are topics that we want Sweetfish to be associated with. And we picked content marketing, B2B podcasting, and content-based networking, off of James's book. Those are core topics to us. There's some other ways to do it though. As I sat down and thought, like, what are other themes you could do? You could possibly work in your category, your new category you're trying to pioneer, that could be a theme across all of you. Different positioning strategy. Maybe there's a specific value proposition you want to push collectively. Maybe even your core values, your core beliefs. I know Sweetfish is just going after core topics we want to be known for. So it certainly makes it easy for me because all of them fall into marketing. So I'm like, yes, that's already what I was talking about already. And one thing I would add to what Logan was talking about before, there's so many different types of content you can add, and it doesn't always have to be polished. In fact, I think I'm going to do a piece even tomorrow or really soon on like some of the struggles I'm having as I'm wrestling with topics that I don't have worked out yet. I'm just going to share the struggle. I'm probably just going to record a video and talk about like, why is it so hard to figure out your own voice like that? Like, why does it take so long? And no one's really figured out a framework for it. I'm figuring it out, but I'm just going to share that struggle with LinkedIn. I think that's good content. I think it's interesting to kind of share the journey.
Yeah. So the content themes are really important there. I think that'll come relatively easily. I think, seeing the folks that are on this call, I think you probably already know, like, okay, these are the 3 to 5 themes that we're going to touch on a consistent basis. But it is, I think, really important to document it and to get it on paper so that the people that are executing the strategy for you, whether it's a social media person or whether you've got somebody else on the team kind of, shoehorning all these resources into a collective effort, they can see what's in your brain already. This 4th one I'm going to talk about, and it's all about setting your content focus ratio. When we originally started this, I thought that I wanted 80% of our evangelist content to be around B2B marketing, because that's obviously who our buyer is. And you see a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn, that are putting out content that is really in no way, shape, or form related to the work that they do. And I was just like, man, they're getting a lot of reach, but are they being as strategic as they could be with who is actually in their comments? And I've seen Chris Walker talk a lot about how that your content is working when the quality of the people actually commenting on it are your ideal buyers. And so with that in mind, I was like, man, 80-20 feels right. 80% needs to be our buyer. And so whether Bill is a B2B marketing person or not, being our COO, 80% of his content should be about B2B marketing. And then I stepped into the call, and as we were dialoguing about this idea, some different evangelists were like, man, I think we should push back on that a little bit. I think going 80-20 on something that is not somebody's expertise or the thing that really wakes them up in the morning and gets them excited. And so what if we went 50-50? And I was like, That's interesting. And as they explained the rationale there, I ended up warming up to this 50-50 content focus ratio. So 50% of our evangelist content is going to be about kind of their role in the business from their perspective, their journey, things they're learning, ways they're growing. And 50% is going to be B2B marketing content. And that B2B marketing content is relatively easy for us to curate for them because we have those pillar channels, right? So we know that 50% of their content needs to come from Content Camp, or it needs to come from B2B growth, or it needs to come from B2B podcasting Q&A, or these customer mastermind calls. And just because they're not the ones actually saying the words on the screen doesn't mean that they can't use a micro video. So Bill could post a video of a clip that we'll probably cut of this scene right here in this video. It's a 1 or 2 minute clip of me talking about this idea. Bill could very well post this video himself and it still works. And so that's where we landed. We landed on a 50-50 ratio, but I think it is a question that you should ask yourself. What do we want our content focus ratio to be? And I think the ratio should be specific to the evangelist perspective and their role. And then the other side of it is who is your buyer persona, and you want content that is really, really helpful for that persona, and figuring out the mix there. So that's number 4. This 5th one, and then I want to jump into getting you guys' thoughts and feedback. This 5th one is around determining the channel and the types of content. Logan, you want to take this one?
Absolutely. So thinking about the channel, again, may seem like one of those rudimentary steps, but skipping it really, you can end up wasting a lot of time. We have a social media coordinator on the team, Emily, who's fantastic at doing LinkedIn stories, or not LinkedIn stories. LinkedIn stories are coming hopefully soon. Instagram stories. And for a while we were working on experimenting on Instagram, but we were finding that we're creating great content, but most of our buyers are just not there. And so it proved to be more of a distraction. So, for a lot of people on this call, it's going to be similar to what we landed on as LinkedIn being the primary channel that we really want to make sure that we exhaust before we start going to another channel. And so that might be LinkedIn for you. It might be YouTube. It might be another social channel based on who's on the call. It's probably not Instagram or Twitter, but maybe it's email. Maybe you're not doing enough with email, and you can find creative ways to take the pillar content and really do something different with email. James and I were just talking the other day, man, a lot of people are not doing email well. There's opportunity to stand out there. So maybe email is the primary channel versus LinkedIn. So thinking about the channel and then thinking about the content types. So as I mentioned earlier, when you're thinking about the pillar pieces of content, the connection to the channel is what are the content types specific to that channel. So we recognized, several years ago that doing a link post, just promoting a podcast episode on LinkedIn did not perform well. Text-only posts got a lot more reach. Lately, as the platform has evolved, slide deck posts have started to get a lot more engagement than just a simple image post. Looks like LinkedIn stories are coming to the platform soon. We've seen more people get success with GIFs and memes on LinkedIn. Micro videos, we've found a process to be able to create those very consistently. And so taking that, man, this one piece of content could become a million pieces, and just narrowing that focus to what are 3 things that we could systematize to make it easy. And then once we kind of master that, or maybe we find that, video isn't doing well or audiograms aren't doing well, we want to switch to text, or we want to do more video, then you double down or you pivot as you go. But it makes it a lot more sustainable to pick maybe 2, 3, 4 core pieces of content types that you're regularly going to produce, and then expand and change from there, rather than saying, yes, we have an episode, we could turn it into 15 different things. What are those things going to be? And having that same conversation every single week.
And just to give you guys some insight on how we've operationalized this, because it really is a nuanced decision that the host of the show, which is all of you, make when you finish the episode. So when you finish that episode, I know I just did one a few days ago, and I thought to myself, okay, that definitely had some good micro videos in it. I don't think it would make for a good slide deck because the talking points were maybe a little scattered. They weren't super comprehensive, or it wasn't a 4-step plan. So maybe not a LinkedIn slide deck for that one, but definitely micro videos. I don't know that I put enough intentionality on the front end on the keyword. So maybe I'm not going to do a blog post on this one, but I want to do micro videos, and I want to do maybe a text only post. And so by thinking through that after each episode, you can communicate to the producer, hey, this is what I want out of this. And this is obviously, if we're, if you're using your internal team, or if you're using our team, you guys know the specifics of your arrangement with us. But that's how I think about it, is equipping the host really with that autonomy and ability to say, this is the kind of content I want from this episode based on what my belief of that content was. And so that's just something there to think about as you think about operationalizing this idea. So I want to spend the rest of this time getting thoughts from you, feedback, pushback, questions. Man, I think you guys are thinking about this wrong. I want this to be a forum where you guys can challenge us in our thinking, and also ask, if you just want us to explore deeper on some stuff. What are you guys' thoughts?
Is there when you approach people about this, was there any feedback that, hey, this isn't going to work, or I'm really not the right person, when you approach the people that you did that you thought would be good fits for it? Our team is not heavy in the social world. I can imagine some feedback that's not very collaborative.
Yeah. That's a great question, Jeremy. I certainly have a huge advantage because I'm approaching it as the CEO. And so by coming at it as the CEO and saying, this is something that I wholeheartedly believe in, and this is the direction we're moving with how we're marketing as a business, that certainly carried some weight. I think Bill is the person that I think of instantly as you explain kind of some of the people on your team. And I just know that Bill is a gem in the fact that he is, in the later stages of his career, and he is still so hungry to learn and to want to grow. And so he was incredibly receptive and looked at this as an opportunity for him to really stretch himself. And I don't know I don't know how helpful that is, because I actually think that's a really rare trait. So maybe in the early days, you gravitate to maybe, I don't know here. I mean, this is new stuff. We're figuring it out as we go, but maybe your approach is, and maybe I approach 2 or 3 people that will likely say yes to this so that we can prove some results first. And then we go to those other people in the organization that may be a little bit reticent, and I can go, hey, but the numbers don't lie. We've gotten 78,000 views on our content in the last 2 weeks. You can't say this doesn't work. And we know that, and I think playing to their ego could work too, Jeremy. Like, you have so much wisdom and insight inside your head. We want to capitalize on that to grow the brand. So Ethan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just 2 quick thoughts to kind of to both sides of it. One, the person has to want it. To me, where these posts come to life isn't, and of course, all the stuff before posting it has to be right. It has to be the right content. You have to set it up properly. You have to make it engaging, ask questions, or create a poll or whatever. But to me, where it really comes to life is in the comments. That's also how it spreads outside your own reach. And so the person has to want it, because they need to commit not just to getting the post up or participating at some basic level, but to actually engage in the conversation. And then to the other side of it, I would look for people within your team. The coolest thing about this is that it's a mutual benefit. It's a benefit to the company and to the individual. Whether the individual is going to learn and grow and commit to your organization for 12 months or for 12 years, they're building a personal brand and a personal network that has real value to them individually and personally, while simultaneously helping your company. And so I would look for people, if you're getting a lot of resistance, I would look for people that are maybe younger in their career that might recognize the mutual value and benefit in order to get that buy-in sooner, rather than trying to pull someone along for the ride that's just going to be a drag for you and for them.
I have a hack. this could work for, because sometimes there's a person in the organization who has a lot to give, but they're not into social and they're not going to be in there commenting. So what do? If you can record them, everything they say is pretty golden. So this is what I did at a previous organization, is I just found that person who was willing to give the time to like record a video, but logging into social just wasn't going to happen. So I made it I would record them, but like as me as the interviewer. So I'd have my phone and be like, I'm going to step behind the scenes with so-and-so, be like, so-and-so, tell me about this, and then record them and then post it to my personal profile. And I'm engaging in the comments for them essentially, because I'm using it for my own profile, but I'm getting them out there too.
Yeah,
That was the best hack I could figure out to get those people in there.
Diana, do you have any thoughts here? I don't want to put you on the
Yeah,
spot.
actually, no. I actually had a couple of questions. So one, thinking about Jeremy's comments, is that we have our company actually might be a little different from yours. I'm not sure who all of you guys work for, but we have a lot of non-native English speakers. And so a lot of it, what happens is that it comes to the content team saying, hey, can you copy edit it? Can you write it? And I'm thinking, internally, we don't have an evangelist, this is a great idea. Is it something where you would suggest that maybe we pick out a couple of folks that we want to, be our evangelists, and then write the content for them? They can just kind of post directly to their accounts.
Yep.
Is that okay?
That's exactly what we do. So we actually have a social media copywriter that is independent of our full-time writers. And so she's dedicated to this. And she's basically ghostwriting for myself, for Dan, for Logan, for Bill, for Kelsey. And that's how we're doing that. So it takes some time. Bill has mentioned to me several times, like, hey, she's not quite getting my voice just yet, but I can see where it's getting there. So every post is getting better. So long as you go into it knowing that it's going to take a little bit of time, so it's going to require some patience. So let the evangelist know that on the front end, like, hey, ghostwriting for somebody is not an easy thing. Like getting inside their head, understanding where they're coming from, the nuances of their voice and their style. Is tough. So give it some breathing room, give it some time. But that's exactly what we do, Diana.
Okay. All right. That's one thing, because I know, some of our writers actually ghostwrite for our executives already. So it's just like, maybe that's just another step. The other question I have for you too is, how do you reconcile the personal voice with the corporate brand voice? So in ours is like, B2B, you got CIOs, enterprise architects as the audience, and we're kind of developing our company brand voice versus everyone's personal voice too. How do you kind of reconcile some of that?
Man, I don't know that I have a fantastic answer for that. Ethan, I mean, you guys have a lot of people at BombBomb posting. What are your thoughts there?
I have a strong opinion, and so take that for what it's worth. I'll qualify it that way. I think the personal brands are the corporate brand. I think that when your buyers, and it sounds like there's some executive level leaders, maybe in some serious roles, and less marketing and sales gregarious types, and maybe a little bit more hardcore and analytical. At the same time, they're still people, and they're going to come into contact with your team. And so the brand voice to me is a lot less important than the collective voice of your people. And I think the collective voice of your people and the collective touch points of your people with your customers and future customers are a lot more impactful than, crafting a brand guideline. I've been involved in crafting a bunch of brand guidebooks and things, and it's a helpful exercise. But I think if you're going to win deals, ultimately it's going to be because people feel trust and confidence in your team members. And I think letting your team members be team members and really be the voice is more powerful, I think, than trying to push their actual voice through some other contrived filter.
Right. Okay.
It comes across to me as inauthentic whenever you see that. You can almost see intuitively, you can see like, oh, Joe, you've actually noticed this before with other people where you're like, I won't mention the person's name, but you've told me, like, I can tell when they're not writing their own stuff. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I actually wanted to, Diane, we should connect afterwards. So I work for a tech company that's 7,000 people, and we sell to CIOs, CTOs, things like that. Ethan, I really like everything you said. I think my own experience running the Tech Tables podcast for Nagarro at 7,000 person company is like, there's going to be a certain level of brand marketing that you won't be able to escape from. And I just know from my own experience posting for myself, people DM me and people message me and from Nagarro, and some people don't like it. So I can tell you it's a reality. I don't want to hijack the call, but yeah, we should connect.
Would love to.
Kind of just give you my experience on how I've navigated
Hi, Jamie.
it.
Okay.
And so,
Okay.
one question, actually probably for James or Logan. I'm curious, how do you tie this? How do you justify the thought leadership when you tie it to pipeline, like actually deals won? How do you really make that case? I figure most people here, at some point, you have to tie it to money in the pocket.
Yep. So for us, I mean, the quick answer there, I saw Ethan raise his hand, so I want him to chime in too.
No, I was just waving goodbye to her.
Okay. So for us, it directly correlates to the DMs we're getting on LinkedIn. I got one yesterday that was like, "Hey James, I want to talk to you about starting a podcast for my company." And then I start a group message, loop in Logan, and send Logan a little text message. "Hey man, LinkedIn alert." Because we're getting a lot of inbound, and our inboxes on LinkedIn are crazy. And so that's how we're doing it, is we're actually seeing it work. Dan is having the same thing happen to him. Logan's obviously having it happen to him. Even our COO, who's posted 3 times now, is having it happen to him. So I don't want to prescribe. I don't want to say that that's going to happen in your context, because you're selling complex. I mean, you're selling very expensive, complex, like it's much more of a complex sale than what we're selling. JK, Ethan, either of you have any thoughts on kind of tying it to revenue, tying thought leadership to revenue?
I don't. No, ours is not that organized. My assumption, ours is all ad hoc at this point. A lot of our sales team in particular is a lot more active on LinkedIn. And my assumption there, and kind of the soft story, I mean, it's anecdotal, of course, is that they're doing it because it's engaging. Like, they're doing it because they're getting more conversations. I think, when I think about the people who've dropped off, who all kind of like surged in around the same time about 3, 4, 5 months ago. A couple people in CS fell away. JK would know this because you were involved at the time. And, it's because it doesn't have as much benefit to them. It has a lot more benefit for a BDR or an SDR or an account executive to be participating in this way, or it's more obvious what the benefit is. And so just anecdotally, the CS people, a couple of them have dropped off, but the sales people are still active. But no, it's one of those that you just trust that it's the right thing at some level, as kind of foolish as that sounds.
Yeah, I love that answer. I love content-based networking. Obviously, I'm in the group. The enthusiasm that I have for James and Sweetfish Media will only take me so far.
Yeah.
As the ladder goes up, for some reason my quota just keeps getting larger and larger, like $5 million larger. And I got a guy who's crushing it right now in sales, but he's sending like 7,000 emails, and I'm just not that guy to send 7,000 emails. Yeah. So spam universe, but you get a couple meetings, and part of it's luck. But anyways.
So are they holding you? Is your VP holding you to that standard? Like, why are you dinking around on LinkedIn when this guy's sending 7,000 emails and getting results?
No, I mean, I'm crushing. He would say, I mean, for instance, like, I'm crushing it on LinkedIn. You might even see posts for, like, for example, you might see, oh, Joe only got 4 likes on a post, and you would think like, oh, that post did terrible, except 2 of them are CIOs, right? Yeah. So that's a win for me. I don't care that I didn't get any type of like huge lift, as long as the right people are seeing the content. Yep. So I mean, I'm in the right long term, and Sunil, my boss, is really great long term. That he's on that perspective. It's just I have to balance the fight I have is the short term results and the long term investment right now.
Yeah.
And so I have to do sales. Like I have to do a lot of outbound work. So I'm basically doing 2 jobs, which is like demand generation, podcasting, and I have to do outbound sales. So I'm trying to get out of doing the outbound sales, which sounds funny. I just think it's getting more and more difficult. And I think being able to have a space dominated with the podcast and stuff like that really is the future. So
I would
JK, what's the
wholeheartedly agree with
culture
you, man.
at oh, sorry, Logan.
I was just gonna say I wholeheartedly agree with you, Joe. I know I'm already preaching to the choir, but like when James was like, "Hey, I think we need our first sales guy," I was like, and I already know what this role is going to look like. It's not going to be, you know, the smile and dial outbound volume that, you know, I had just grown so tired of. It's going to be, you know, where it's content-based networking, it's building my brand and pulling people in, everything like that, this half of your job. So I totally get the, like, I want to get over there. Thankfully James just had the spot for me, so I got lucky.
JK, what's the culture been at Flat File around this stuff, around thought leadership? Is your CEO pretty receptive to this kind of approach to marketing?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we're a startup, so we're 16 full-time employees. A lot of them are engineers. Like we're a engineering first organization for sure. And you know, the engineers don't really care about that stuff.
Yeah.
However, our CEO, who is an engineer, is very much on thought leadership. And then the other co-founder, who's on the growth side of the business, he's actually gonna attempt hosting a podcast, and that's, you know, we're doing it with you guys, which you know. And I brought that idea to him because I just saw how successful it was with Ethan and at BombBomb, and he had his reservations. He's had bad experiences with podcasting in the past. Hey, and so, you know, I'm trying to change that. Like I'm hoping that he'll see it as an awesome relationship building channel. And like, I'm just kind of setting the expectation with him as, hey, this is what we need to do. Like you've been saying, we want to create a category because like we do not have direct competition, no direct competitors. And it is just a true blue ocean opportunity. The demand for the product is greater than I've ever seen, which is awesome. Especially since I'm in marketing. It's fantastic. Makes my job easy. You know, he keeps saying this though, like we need to create this category, we need to build this out and be thought leaders in the area in this category. And, you know, I said, I think thought leadership and podcasting is a huge portion of that.
Yeah.
And it's a relationship channel. So I'm setting the expectation with him as like, this isn't a revenue attribution channel. Like we're not going to go, this podcast generated this many dollars. It's more so building the community around the problem, elevating our ideal customer, right? Our ideal personas, bringing them onto the show, talking about their experiences. It has nothing to do with us and our product. Like we're just talking about the problems and how they've solved these problems and creating that community around it and like agitating those problems. And eventually they'll realize, oh, Flat File is a solution for these problems. And then the other side of it is you bring on your target accounts, you bring on your, you know, leadership from those accounts, and that opens the door and they get exposure to your brand. And it's like a low barrier of entry. It's not a sales call. It doesn't feel like a demo. It's just a relationship building channel. And that's actually what I'm calling it, you know, with our co-founders. I'm like, hey guys, this is a relationship building channel. Think of it as that. Don't even think of it as like demand gen. It's above that. It's like its own thing. And so they're going in with that expectation now, and I'm hoping that it'll be successful because of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Joe, have you seen, and I know we're past time, so I want to jump off, you know, if anybody needs to jump off, feel free to jump off. But Joe, I'm curious, I know you have long sales cycles and, you know, complex deals, but have any guests on your show, have you seen like motion toward like, oh man, I had this CIO on the show and now we're in an active deal cycle with them? Has that started happening yet with your guests?
Not yet. What is it? Okay, you want me to hold you because you want to see? Okay. Not yet. I would say the best guest I've had so far, I kind of have two. One is I have the head of AI and robotics at Honeywell. We've just been able to build a really great relationship. So we're actually going to do a personal productivity webinar together. So I had a call with him yesterday, and
second content collaboration.
Yes, it's where it's at, man. It is where it's at.
And we just started connecting, and like he was like basically like, dude, you're like my brother. And it was like really cool. So I could kind of start to see it right there. And then it was probably like 98% related to like, hey, we're going to do this webinar together. We're going to collaborate. No Nagarro, no Honeywell. And then like probably 2% of the call was like business, like, cause I'd been cold emailing people and I've been running LinkedIn ads directly at Honeywell. Actually, it worked so well. People started going to him. So asking, so he's actually going to introduce me to some folks, but I mean, due to the COVID situation right now, all their budgets are locked down. Right. So, but it was like really great insight into, hey, no teams in Honeywell are going to take meetings for like new vendors until like September at least. Yeah. So it's really great. It doesn't like fix my immediate need for like sales calls. So it's like, I have that constant struggle and I'm trying to be really patient. But I sense like that could be huge. And like, if it pulls off, then it's like, it's a huge win. Yeah. Cause it could easily be $5 million for me. In just multiple SOWs. So that's one piece. Another piece that's been really great is obviously Logan introduced me to Gary, who was on one of your guys' shows. I had a call with him. He's going to be a podcast guest. So pretty kind of fantastic there. That's kind of like ideal buyer. Had a CIO that I'm trying to grow an account at, who I posted on LinkedIn, and he emailed me like 5 minutes later and was like, hey, can you ask the security expert these 3 questions? And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I love this. CIO, my own CIO coming to me. Like, how many times do you see a CIO going to a salesperson? It doesn't happen that often. So yes. I love it. So I really see it in motion. My biggest fear is like, don't have enough time, but hopefully I will. Sunil's pretty patient, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it. And all it takes for me is one win, and then it shuts down all of the critics. Yeah. I just need one really good win. Yep.
I love it. Awesome. Ethan, has BombBomb had any, you guys have been doing the show for a while now. Has there been any internal, like, hey, is this really worth it? Or is
no, man. Well, I just listening to some of the conversation across the group today, it's like, it's just such a privileged situation, because the buy-in from Steve, our CMO, and Darren, one of our 2 co-founders, was early, immediate. It's never been in question. The gal leading ABM efforts is using the content. So that's a win for us. And it's just like another anchor into it.
Is she feeding you guest opportunities with target accounts that she's trying to go after?
A little bit. We're going a little bit back and forth. For example, we had been prospected by Sendoso, several of us had, and I have a habit of sending videos back to people I'm not the buyer for any of these things. So I constantly use video email replies to thank them for reaching out and let them know what I did with their email. I don't give out contact information. I just promise that I forward it to the right person internally, which I always do. And then cross-sell them on BombBomb. And so that started this kind of back and forth. And we ended up with like 3 or 4 Sendoso people in free trials. I coincidentally was on a webinar style, virtual event with their CEO and invited him on our podcast. He instead gave me his chief customer officer, which was great. That one will release in a few weeks. And so, and Laura, who JK hired, was in the loop on all of that. And so it's just this, to the point of being like this relationship building thing. There are a handful of brands or companies where the podcast was either the lead in to other engagement, or it was like a nice extra touch that was not so much about, are we a right fit? How many seats? What's the price point? What objections do you have? It's just this kind of off on the side, like, oh, I like these people. Oh, I know these people. And then of course, now we're booked out like insanely deep, but later, a few months ago, it was like, 4 weeks after that nice experience, then you get to co-promote the episode and all the other things that you all well know about. And so, I've never had any resistance internally. We certainly haven't had the $5 million win that Joe is working on, but, we've had a lot of kind of smaller stuff, and fortunately for me, because I enjoy doing it so much, I've had zero resistance internally.
That's awesome. I love
There's
that.
also just so much that you can't attribute to it that you don't know, you might not know, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
sure there are some deals that have come in that they probably
Totally.
heard the podcast, or
Yep.
and that's, you just got to keep doing it.
Mhm.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think
and the nice thing for us is that customer experience is a level up from the product or service, but the
Yes.
conversation about video messages is not a difficult one to have as a natural extension. And of course, with self episodes, and when I get the right guests, I bring video into the conversation. So for example, I'm sure you know Todd Capone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Transparency sale.
yeah. So I just interviewed him and read his book, and I asked him, like, what's your level of familiarity going into the conversation? What's your level of familiarity with video messages, video email, video and LinkedIn? He was like, I've received a couple, but I've never done it myself. And so he has a great chapter on email and prospecting in particular, and it's all about trust and transparency and confidence. And so I've just framed that question like that for him. I was like, hey, I know you have some exposure to video email. And of course he gives some great response and winds up endorsing video email very, very explicitly, because it does the two things he thinks are most important to do. And so you can soft sell what we do. And even when you're not, it's not a long walk from customer experience to giving people a more personal and human treatment.
I tell that story so much. The positioning and branding of your show in the early days matters so much. And what you guys did with, hey, customer experience sits up here. We're not going to start the video email podcast. We're going to start the customer experience podcast. Naturally, we're going to have conversations down here. Hell, we could even have a video email series within the customer experience podcast if you play it out like we've done with B2B growth. So I talk about that often, because I think the way you guys position the show at the beginning is such a critical factor in the success you guys are able to see a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years down the road with it.
Yeah. You can pat yourself on the back whenever you do that if you want to, because that's a good conversation. It was helpful to walk it out with you.
Love it. Awesome.
Hey, real
All right,
quick.
fellas. Well, thank you all so much for being here.
One last question. Do you guys have
Yeah.
any recommendations for boxes? I'm trying to send a bunch of boxes out to the podcast guests. I'm going to put stuff in them, obviously, but I'm just curious. Do you guys have any websites or any recommendations?
Dan is looking at this because we're trying to figure out how to create a better experience around sending podcast equipment to customers. So
Okay.
email dan.sanchez@sweetfishmedia.com. And
Okay.
I think he'll have a couple of vendors that he's been looking at.
Awesome. Thanks, James.
Sweet.
Thank you.
James, real quick, Casted. What do you know? What do you like? I'm doing a demo with him at
Casted.
1.
So have you played with it yet?
I have not even looked at it at all. I've listened to a few episodes of their podcast because I just guested on it.
Yeah.
And I just figured it was worth taking the demo.
Yeah. It feels a little early to me. I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts whenever you take so you haven't taken the demo yet?
Nope, it's at the top of the hour. It's like 40 minutes away.
Shoot me a text after you get done with the demo, or like, I would love to hear your thoughts. To me, it feels like it does a lot of things that won't actually work in practicality. So like the busting up of the content, like the automated way that it turns things into different pieces of content, because there's not a human touch in it, feels like that content's not going to really resonate with people. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's easy to talk about that as a benefit. Like, oh, look, this thing's going to automate the repurposing of your content. And now obviously I'm coming from a biased place because that's a
Dude.
service we offer, but I think it matters.
Man, that's the reason I edit the video clips of my own show, and then I feed them to your producer,
Yep.
and then that work comes back to Vivian on our team, who puts it into WordPress. It's
Yep.
my editorial layer,
Yep.
and it reinforces. It's a learning process for me. I learn the content better, so I'm internalizing it more. And yeah, I just can't see how a robot would find the best takes in an episode.
Yeah. But I don't know what all they're doing around like attribution and how they can point the like, I think the aspiration of the product is great. Like, hey, a lot of the conversation we were having earlier today, right? Like, how can we tie revenue back to this particular asset of the podcast? And I think their aspiration is to build out that functionality. I don't know how close they are to that yet. That seems like it would be really, really hard to do. But I was just thinking about them earlier today. I was like, man, they would be a great, I should become friendlier with them. I think they're a sponsor of the show, but beyond that, I mean, we have access to the product. I've never messed with it because Logan hasn't really been, he hasn't waved a flag like, oh my gosh, this is game changing.
Yeah.
And the little that I know about it, I'm just like, I think they're trying to get a robot to do what a human should be doing. Is my take, but I'll be really curious how you think the demo, like what you learned in the demo.
That's cool. Yeah. And it should, I mean, what I'm most curious about, and this is a sales and marketing process thing. I told her, she hosted me for 30 minutes and all we did was talk about podcasting, the purpose, the approach, some techniques, some challenges. She asked, how do you, some of the ROI stuff that we were asking in this conversation. And so I'm curious how much of that she translates to the sales guy who does the demo.
Yeah.
Like how customized it is or how canned it is. It'll be interesting to see. You familiar with Casted, JK?
So they're basically trying to be Marketo, or they're trying to be the Marketo of B2B podcasting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I learned about it on, James, do you produce Ground Up or no?
No.
Okay.
That's where I heard John Bonini interview them though.
Yeah, that's how I heard of them. And then they came back up again. And then the CEO who hosts the podcast hit up John Ruggie.
What's the name of that podcast?
The Casted Podcast.
Oh, that's awful. God, they missed an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Man.
It's called Casted, I think.
It kind of goes if it's called Casted, but God, don't brand the show around you. Brand it around your ideal buyer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up.
It's called the Casted Podcast.
Yeah.
I think you would like it, James. I think it would help you because they're all B2B podcast hosts for the most part, almost all of them. I think you listening to those interviews will, just from a customer profile standpoint, I think you'd find it really interesting. You might at some point find some of the episodes boring because you're like, these are themes I've already heard, but it's been interesting. I listened to maybe 6 or 7 of them. And because I was just in this kind of like, I'm trying to figure out what's the next evolution for our show. Is there an evolution or like what's going on? Like, what can I do better kind of thing? How can I improve the process or improve the outcomes or whatever? And so I figured by listening to those, they're all interviews with podcast hosts and they're almost all B2B, if not all B2B. And I think you'd find it interesting from who are these people and how are they approaching their shows?
Yeah, no, I just subscribed to it. I hadn't heard of it yet. What I love is that, they actually have a podcast. You'd be shocked how many people that are swimming in the space that don't even have a freaking podcast. Yeah. I'm like, what are you doing? if this is
No, we
something
don't.
you're
We don't
building
send
an
any
entire business
videos,
around.
but we'll sell you the opportunity to do it yourself.
Yeah, right. Like we were just talking about. I mean, they're not really a competitor because they do it. I mean,
Yeah.
they're doing like $35,000 an episode. Like that's the kind of show that they produce. So it's a completely different product.
Interesting. I didn't even know they produced stuff. That's nuts.
Well, it's a company called Pacific Content, and so they've
Okay.
done like repeat customers, Index's podcast. I think they did Dell's podcast. Maybe they work with massive brands. The
Nuts.
problem, right, in that kind of content that I'm about to actually create some content around, it's not sustainable. You can't create that level of quality for a sustained period of time. And so I haven't thought about Zendesk in a year because that's the last time they posted an episode. And of course it is because they're spending 35 grand an episode to do it. And
Wow.
so, but that company, Pacific Content, we were talking before this call, me and Dan and Logan, we were like, do they even have a podcast? I don't even think they have a podcast, but they're advocating for these brands to have their own, branded podcast. And so I just think so much of what makes our marketing special is that we're drinking our own champagne and and so it gives us so much more credibility to say, no, you don't need to get super fancy with your audio because we have a top 100 marketing podcast that gets 130,000 downloads a month. And we never did any of that stuff because we're doing it. And so I don't know, like, obviously I'm biased there. And I think you can.
Well, and I share that bias around video too, is that the threshold for good enough is much lower than you think. And what it really is about quality of content and relevance of content to whoever you're trying to, in our case, get to engage with your video and respond appropriately. And for you, it's to, listen to episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it took me 5 years to get to a point where I've got a little light above my desk and, the DSLR that's filming, and that's fun and nice, but it's like, I did this for 4.5, almost 5 years with none of this.
Yeah.
And we did pretty well. And so it's one of those like nice to haves, but I think we've been talking a lot. I think people hide, and this may be the same thing with video. I think people hide behind quality.
Yes.
And when you hide behind quality, it's an excuse to not do quantity, when in reality, you need to be doing both. Like you have to have a framework to be able to figure out, how do I do lots of quality? Because if you're doing once a month, you're not going to stick out. There's too much content in the world. You can have and quality is subjective. So anyway.
Can I hear you? Can I hear you is the good enough threshold. Can I understand all the words you're saying? If there is a little bit of, to me, the only thing that really turns me off to a podcast, well, of course, besides it's not an interesting conversation to me personally, but really it's just like bad internet connection where words are like garbled.
Yeah.
Oh, and I can get away with that like every 3 to 4 minutes, but twice a minute, it's like, oh my God, this is just brutal. That's it.
Tough.
But besides that, it's all good.
Yep.
JK, it's good to see you.
It's good to
Awesome.
see
All right, fellas, we'll have to do this in Colorado Springs again one time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
When all this craziness is over.
We're in pretty good shape here. We're a safe place to travel.
We
Florida,
are.
not so much. But
Yeah. Yeah. You may need to quarantine yourself on the way in because our governor's he was talking about, we were going to go to Arizona to visit a couple colleges with our son. And our governor, Polis, was talking about potentially quarantining people coming from the hot spots. And we were like, we're not going to mess with that.
All right, I'm assuming you guys were going to do a theme park on your college visits, but theme parks are still no-go, right?
Some of them are open. We're doing a road trip. We're going to hit WashU in St. Louis, Butler in Indianapolis, and Miami of Ohio. And there are 3 parks that we can visit. We already bought tickets to one of them. And there are 2 other parks
And
that
they're
have
open?
already
They're
announced that they're opening. Yeah. And the best thing is
Universal's open.
30% capacity. Masks required, 30% capacity. So every day my son reads me comments on the social media posts of people that are out of their freaking minds about wearing masks to roller coaster parks. I'm like, the fewer people, the better. I just want to binge ride.
Disney's coming back online July 11th, and it's limited capacity. And I'll be interested to see. I mean, when Universal opened June 11th, it was like crickets. I mean, people that went were like, nobody was there. So
Yeah, my son follows all the social media of all these parks, and they were showing videos of like brand new rides, like the waiting gates for brand new roller coasters, and like people are just like running around and getting back on, getting back on, getting back. So I'm like, I hope that's happening in late July, early August is when we're going.
that's awesome.
Awesome.
All right, fellas, I'll let you get to it. Thanks for
You guys.
hanging on later. Bye.